because there's no doubt that there is a huge connection between prisons, between drug and substance abuse and alcohol abuse, and as I'm learning, TCs and therapeutic communities. I want to do 5 things over the next 25 minutes. I want to tell you a little bit about prisons in Ireland. I then want to show you how we compare really globally in relation to prison populations. I then want to talk to you about how we're changing, a little bit about our strategy and change, and then I want to finish by talking about drugs, alcohol, substance misuse, and TCs. So this is the prison service in Ireland. There's Little Ireland, 4.7 million people. We have 13 prisons in the country, and it's really good in Ireland because we have regional prisons. It's very important to say that 3 of our prisons have just over 100 prisoners in them, and about 3 of them have sort of over 300 prisons in them, and then on we go to our largest prison, which is the Midlands, which is 850 prisoners in it. Now, too many, by the way, but we are where we are. So we have a prison population of about 3,500. We have a staff of 3,300. We have a budget of over 332 million, and our prisons. So that's where we are. And then it's important to see, how does our country then feature in terms of global? How do we compare in terms of the world? So here's the map of global rates of imprisonment. The heavy red colours is the kind of the more intensive prison population. So this morning, for instance, 10 million people woke up in prisons, right? So 10 million beds in the world that we know of. And that's a lot of people in prison this morning. So where did they wake up? I mean, the most fairest way to kind of compare and contrast is how many per 100,000. So we can see that the US lead the way with about 666 per 100,000. So they're top of the pile. Then we have China and Brazil next, Russia, India. Then England and Wales, about 146 per 100,000. And then here in the green, we're about 75 per 100,000. So we're in a good position in Ireland in that we're in the top 10 countries in the world with the least amount of imprisonment. So that's a good position. Now, we are kind of struggling to hold on to number 9, so we're not up there yet, and there's a lot more we can do. But I do think that the rate of imprisonment per 100,000 is something of a signal. It's a signal to how penal policy and punitivism and all that goes with that is kind of floating around in the ether of a country. So that's us. We're pleased with that, but it wasn't always that way, and we really risked over the last 16 years, spiraling upwards. And you can see from the chart here, over the last 16 years, our prison population, rising from 2000 up to, up here, these are daily averages. But this is the most important one, the prison rate. So, in 2000 we had 77 per 100,000. In 2016 we have 77 per 100,000 because our population obviously has gone up. But you can see here in 2010, we saw this dramatic 6, 7, 8 spiral upwards. Now, in comparison, in real figures, that was 1,000 more people in prison 5 years ago. So we had 1,000 more men, very few women, in prison 5 years ago. And, the view was, why are we doing this? Why are we following upwards? So there was a decision made in 2011 that we needed to halt this, really. We just had to stop. And there was a lot of political will. There was a lot of kind of good, the economy burst, so the money fell out of the country. So we couldn't invest in more prisons, so that was helpful in the sense that, we couldn't build our way out of this problem because we were just about to do it. We were just about to build our way out of this problem. We had all the plans set for a big super prison outside Dublin, 2,300. Anyway, money went, you all know the story, and we had to rethink. And there was a lot of political will, there was some support, but also the civil servants. I've always maintained that civil servants have a lot more power than they think they have. You can show your intent of what you want to do. So 6 years ago, we said we'd take 1,000 people out of the prison service. We said it publicly on the RTE News at 6. Anybody can go back and see the interview with Paul Reynolds. Now, it was laughed at the time. people saying it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. How could you do that? You know, and also it was frowned on by government. Some people in government. You know, how can you determine what the prison population can be? But you can. You absolutely can. You can do whatever you want if you say and if you believe you can do things. So how do we do it? So with our probation colleagues. And we couldn't survive without our probation colleagues because they are the community link. Now, prior to this, we had very little, very poor contact with our probation colleagues. So what we did is we introduced 2 programs. This line here, the blue line, and the green line. So the blue line is community return. So that means a scheme with our probation colleagues where people can trade up prison time for community time. Okay, so in Ireland, if you get an 8-year sentence, you automatically get 25% off, automatically. Okay, so you're going to do 6 years. With the community return scheme, at 4 years, so at half your sentence, if everything else is well and you're doing what you should be doing in prisons, you can swap prison time for community time. An assessment done by the probation service, and out you go into the community. And you can see the rise up to the peak of 450 that year went on community return. And that was very successful. And it's dropped dramatically now back to about 300. That's because, like, it's worked. We've done it. But also the green line. Let me say the green line is what we call community support. These are people, so the blue line first is people serving sentences of 1 year to 8 years. Okay, 1 year to 8 years. You can avail of half your time off. But the green line is 0 to 1 year. And this is the group that we really have been concentrating over the last 2 to 3 years. This is the group who are spinning in and out of prison. And they're a group who are homeless, they're a group of addiction problems, they're a group who've got mental health problems, etc. And with the probation service and with our providers in the community, we've been investing heavily in providing packages for this group of people. And as you can see over here, we've got the good news. You know, that year in 2011, by the way, we peaked at 4,607. We had no spaces for them. They were on the floor, they were everywhere. But now you can see we have 3.5. So, you know, we run now with a vacancy level of about 10-15%. And there's no reason why we couldn't actually reduce that number down further. There is absolutely no reason why we couldn't have a prison population similar to Finland. And we model ourselves a lot on Finland. Because we have a similar culture, we have similar kind of religious and political backgrounds, and you know, we have a similar kind of economy as well. We don't have the riches of the Norwegians, and you're here, and we sat last night and drank some wine. So, but like we just don't. We don't have that revenue stream. We're much more dependent on other kinds of business. So I suppose that's how we did it. We couldn't have done it as a prison service without the probation service and without our community partners. And like I'm very proud of that because it's really helped us. So our strategy, which we launched last year, so we had a strategy previously, but our strategy we launched last year has just 4 key actions in it. It's about supporting our staff. And like our staff are key to this change process because our staff, the prison officer on the ground, is the key change agent. You know, they are the person, those men and women, in their daily interactions with people on the landings, they're the ones who create the legitimacy. They're the ones who create the ethical, the values. They're the ones who really signal the intent of a prison service, you know, the humanity of a prison service. So we have to support our staff because they're our key change agents. It's not our psychologists or our psychiatrists. Now, they do help, but it's these people every day in your good morning and your good afternoon and, you know, here's the paper or here's what you want and being respectful and we've done a lot of work, and our staff in prisons, I think, and people who have visited, we have a huge humanity amongst our staff group. We have our problems, and you all know about those, but we have a staff group that is built up on relationships. And that's been difficult for us because 20 years ago, you know, prison officers were not encouraged to converse with prisoners. It was in our prison rules, actually. It was a rule that you didn't converse with prisoners. So now we're turning that in its head and saying, but you have to have daily contact. Supporting our prisoners because there are people that we have in this environment. And now that we have 1,000 less, we have an opportunity to really now concentrate and support in terms of rehabilitation. Like, you know, rehabilitation was kind of just a sham. 60 years ago. People were talking about it. Some people were doing a bit of it, but really you were keeping the lid on the system. You were doing crowd control, you were doing warehousing, and we were doing it well enough, but we weren't really getting to the heart of the problems that people present with. Obviously supporting victims, because we have to keep victims to the fore of our minds, and then enhancing our organisational capacity. It's always trying to improve our organisation, always trying to be smarter, and like we're always shifting, and prisons are difficult to shift because they're institutions. Our values, teamwork then, just integrity there. We've been trying to talk about integrity a lot in the prison service, and that's about sort of doing the right thing, and doing the right thing even when nobody's looking, and actually saying it as it is, and being honest to our problems, and being honest to our failings, and of course our successes, but not having this kind of cover up and, but showing out the challenges and the problems of prison and what it represents. Potential, people have enormous potential, and we heard that yesterday in some of the presentations in the plenary. Our people in prison have enormous potential, and we see it every day. And it's just remarkable how they can change and how they can grow against the background that they have been born into in sometimes. And in terms of traumas, most of us can deal with one or two serious traumas in our life, death of a parent, abuse in the family, alcoholism, all the rest of it. But like when you build up 6 or 7 of these traumas that a lot of our people have suffered, you think, how in God's name are they surviving? But they are. So they're so resilient, and it's about creating the opportunity. It has to be safe. It has to be in an environment that's safe, that's non-bullying, non-intimidating, non-dominating, and that's built on respect and dignity, and then, of course, supporting people. So some of our objectives has been sentence management and structured release. Now, again, as I said earlier, we couldn't have said this 5 years ago. Well, we did say it, but there was no meaning to it. But now, 5 years ago, not only did we have 4,600 people in prison, but we had 1,000 people on temporary release. 1,000. So we had a quarter of our prison population on release in the community. Because it's very unique in Ireland. It's when the courts make a sentence in Ireland, they hand over the management of that sentence to the executive, which is us, and then we manage the sentence. So we can manage the sentence whatever way we like. So in those days, because of the crowd problem, we simply released them. We simply just churned them around, spun them around and released them. So a van would come into Mountjoy with 30 people on Friday afternoon, we released 30 people. That's how scientific it was. That's the reality. Today we have less than 200 people on temporary release. Less than 200, 190 this morning. And all of those are on temporary release with support, with supervision from the probation service, on community return, on community service, hooking back into services in the community. So we can now really, with meaning, talk about this. Rehabilitation and integration then is now becoming something that we're a lot prouder of in talking about. But we have to incentivize people. We have to give people motivation. We have to give them opportunities to actually say, well, do you know what, I do want a bit of this change, but what's in it for me? And you have to actually get people. So we have an incentivized regime scheme, which I could talk to you about later if you want, that actually allows people to become drug-free, to engage with the services, and then trade that in for an open centre or for release. And also, the final point there is our estate modernisation. 5 years ago, 1,000 people were slopping out every morning, 1,000. Now that's really not a good place for rehabilitation. Today it's 60, okay? So we nearly have it ended. We almost have it ended. Now this is a mega, because when you walked into Mountjoy 5 years ago, every prisoner was slopping out every morning. Today, 0, none. They all have a toilet, washing basin, hot and cold water in their cells, etc., etc. Much more dignifying, much more honest, much more real, and much more allowing people the dignity to actually talk about their change. So the modernisation is very important. There's one other thing I just want to, as a byword. This week that has just gone by, that you're in Ireland, is the first week since the foundation of this state that no child has been in prison. Just think about that for 1 second. No child in prison last week. For the first time. And like we've done children in prison all the time for 100 years. None. It is a mega transformation. And also, we now have the laws in place to say that it's illegal to have a child in prison, you know? So now we can actually get the courts to enforce it. So it's a real big shift in our thinking in penal policy in Ireland. And now we can concentrate on the 18 to 21-year-olds, who are a very vulnerable group in prison. And I mean, you know, people switch in age, but just as an example of the shift in thinking. So, moving to addiction and mental health, there is a complete connection between addiction, mental health, and prison. And so now we're talking about valuing the time that people are spending in prison, valuing their opportunities in prison, and helping people. And people in prison, they have huge ambition to change. They want to change, but they have to be supported in that change. And as we heard yesterday morning, it's about their choice. It's about making the choices, getting them ready for the change. And I suppose we, in the past, have been too much prescriptive in pushing people along the system. Come on, you must be ready for this. Come on, you know. Now it's about getting people, creating pathways for them about choice. And people can falter, and people can actually go back. But we need to give people second, third, 10, 15, 20 chances. And providing a range of treatment and interventions in prison is something that we can really think about now. And, you know, we have been criticised in the past. Peter McVerry would have been very critical. He would have said he's an advocate, by the way, a Jesuit advocate in Ireland who's done tremendous work. But he would be critical in saying, you have an opportunity in prison to really help people with drug addiction, but you don't use it, you don't take it. You simply spin them around. And he's right. We have a unique opportunity and challenge in prison and a comprehensive range of treatments. And we can now ensure, as I said, that all releases are planned and that all releases are done in a structured way. And that's not something we could have done before, because you need people to move along the system at the pace that they can move. Our collaboration with the HSE is very strong, and we also have a joint alcohol and drug action plan with the probation service, because we do, you know, spend a lot in terms of treatment. Now we need to spend more, but some of the key principles of those reports that we've got is about access to treatment options, about allowing people in and out of different settings, you know, from secure to medical detox to methadone to counselling to progression unit. A really good idea in Mountjoy West, having a progression unit, to open prisons. So having a whole range of settings, choice, which we mentioned earlier, and a coordinated approach. And we're getting better at that. And as we heard yesterday, also about evidence-based, about actually doing research. And now, and we have always done research, but now we're doing a lot more meaningful research. And we're doing, and I'll show you some of our research statistics. So our budget combined with the probation service is about 3.3 million per annum in this area, just in addiction. And that's without counting staffing and medical costs. That's just actually the grants that go out. And prison, you know, presents a challenge. And it's an opportunity. There's also dangers in prison, huge dangers, you know. And people who say prison doesn't work, they're kind of half right, because you draw people into prison, and then you know you can exacerbate the issues that they have by access to drugs and you know access to crime in the sense of all days in this environment. So there is challenges and opportunities in prison, and you know, education and treatment and rehabilitation is really important to us. And like the EBTs who provide our education services provide, you know, 120 full-time teachers into our prison system every year. That's an enormous benefit in giving people pathways out. Now, yeah, so reducing harm and supporting recovery. I like this strategy, by the way. I like the name. It's not punitive. It's a health-led approach. I think it's a signal where Ireland is going. My point there about drugs in prison, like we do have to name that problem. We have a serious problem in Ireland, probably as serious as anybody has in the world in terms of drugs in prison. We have just an epidemic of people continuously wanting to bring drugs into prison. And we did a study of people who died by suicide between 2009 and 2015. You know, it cost about 64 people died altogether, some of them through natural causes. But 68% of them who died had illegal substances in their blood. We went to the coroner's office, we got the toxicology reports. So 68%. So you can see the size of the problem. Finishing then, in terms of Coolmine has been very important to us. You know, example, in 2014, 21 left, but 21 left the programme early of the 44 who went out. And I mean, Coolmine tell us that they're not ready. They want to do it, but they're not ready. And they need more therapeutic work, they need more possibilities, they need more choices. And we in the prison service need to develop a TC in Ireland, and we're going to do it. Like, we are going to do it. We're convinced that we have to do it in Mountjoy West, and a number of you were up there. So we have a 40-bedded unit. Now that we have the children out of the system, they're going to replace the children's unit, and there's a special 4 million unit that we built for the children there a few years ago, which we're going to use. And we see the opportunity of developing a TC, which is a pathway for people into a programme for 12 months and then on to Coolmine or on to a step down in community programme, some. But, you know, it is obviously the way to go. We have this opportunity to do it, and we're going to do it. And you know the benefits of TCs, and thank you very much.